Hello, my name is Brian Koegle, and I'm the founding partner of Koegle Law Group APC. And today I'm happy to be here with my partner, Lucas Rowe, who basically heads up our business litigation, employment litigation, and business counseling departments. Luke, one of the areas that we get a lot of questions from employers and from business owners is, what type of contracts do they need to have in place to ensure that they've got a successful business practice? Many times we're dealing with brand new startup companies right out of the box, and they'll just simply ask, where do I start in way of written agreements? What's your advice in those situations?
Yeah, so there's a couple aspects that you can think about overall, and I would divide them up really into two categories: your internal business, your employees, your management, that sort of thing, and then your clients on the outside of the business. And with respect to your customers, I mean, if you're contracting with anybody, if you're providing a service to someone, or if you're getting a service from someone else that's a vendor to your company, you want to have a written agreement there. At the very least, a term sheet that sets forward what you're paying for or what they're paying you for, the term or the length of that agreement, and the services that are expected from that agreement. Because what happens frequently is if you're doing handshake deals with your vendors or customers, when a dispute arises, you don't have anything to rely on when you go to mediation or to court, God forbid. It's going to be a he said, she said. And the court's going to look at maybe what you were doing over the course of your relationship with this vendor. And what was happening with this vendor or one of your clients might not be exactly what you anticipated from that relationship. But there's not going to be a way for you to prove that they're in breach somehow because there's nothing in writing. Similarly, with your employees, you want to have serious job descriptions to describe what those employees are supposed to be doing so that there's a clear expectation of what their role and responsibilities are. You want to have things in place. Even if you have just one employee in the state of California, you should have an employee handbook that has anti-discrimination, anti-harassment, anti-retaliation policies in it that lays out how the employees are paid. There are a lot of compliance issues in the state of California that should be written down in a handbook so that every single employee now and in the future can look to this one spot and find an answer. And sometimes you're going to have a contract with your employee. A certain level, especially if you're an upper management or executive level employee, you want to have an employment contract that specifies what they're going to be paid, whether there are performance or benchmark-based bonuses involved with that contract, the terms for their termination, if it's for cause or for any reason. Once you get into higher level employees especially, you want to lay out all of those expectations in writing so that there's no question about who's supposed to be doing what and what the standards are for performance.
So on client-facing contracts, it's really kind of essential to make sure that there's no ambiguity and that all parties have a meeting of the minds, as we call it in the law, right? We want to ensure that there's an opportunity that everyone has a clear directive as to what the plan is. And quite candidly, especially for smaller businesses, if you come forward with a term sheet of your own, it shows a level of professionalism. It shows organization, and it shows that you are actually paying attention to and interested in complying with all the laws and regulations.
That's exactly right. And I hesitate to use the word a serious business, but I mean, in reality, it kind of shows that you're a serious business by having term sheets, by having contracts, by having agreements where everything is spelled out between you and your clients or your vendors. Because if you don't, you're just creating the potential for problems and the potential for liability. And it's our job to counsel you on how to avoid those potential liabilities in the first place. And that's one of the things we would tell you. Write it down, put it in a contract, have the parties sign it. It's important.
As to employee-facing agreements, one of the biggest issues that we run into in litigation when it comes to employment claims is expectations. If you don't explain the expectations of the business to the employee, they're going to assume that they can get away with the bare minimum. But if you lay things out with specificity and give them guideposts and regulations and say, this is how we want you to perform your job, then that gives you leverage in the event that they turn around and fail to perform, or they refuse to follow your policies or your procedures. You can come back and focus on the fact that there was a violation of your internal policy, which led to a disciplinary action or termination. Where we run into problems is where expectation isn't clearly communicated and the employee doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is especially true for smaller businesses because as you get larger, the roles within that business become more narrow. You know, your employees' duties and responsibilities are very narrowly construed because there's so many employees who are doing other aspects of that job. But if you're a small to mid-sized business, especially where the person in the office isn't just doing accounting, but they're helping with the bookkeeping and they're helping with the other administrative tasks. If those things are not laid out in their job description so that it's clear that those might be expected of them at some point, even if their primary role is something else, then they might not perform to the level of your expectation because they weren't anticipating to do these other things. Or perhaps they might say, well, I'm not doing that because it's not in my job description. And if you want me to do that, maybe you should pay me more or something along those lines where it kind of goes to a lot of things we've been talking about, is that putting things in writing clarifies everything for everyone. And that doesn't matter if it's your customer, your vendor, or your employee. Everybody knowing exactly what they're supposed to do is the most important thing you can have in the business.
I couldn't agree more.